Okay, it appears we are live. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Alberto Villafan. I am the digital producer at Sahan Journal. And this afternoon, we are going to be talking about Trump's travel ban and its impact on immigrant communities in Minnesota. I'm here with two guests that can help us better understand the ban and its implications on local communities. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Yolani, why don't you go first?
Thank you for having me. Thanks for Sahan for hosting this important conversation. My name is Jelani Hussein. I'm the executive director for CARE Minnesota. Council of American Islamic Relations is a local civil rights organization that supports broad community. And I'm originally from Somalia and been here in Minnesota for pretty much most of my life. And so I'm really excited about this conversation. I'm really happy that all of you are joining us. And for those who are joining us, share it with others.
Thank you so much, Jelani. Matthew, would you like to say hello?
Sure thing. My name is Matthew Webster, and I'm a senior immigration attorney at Frederickson and Byron Law Firm here in the Twin Cities. I live immigration law every single day and was honored to be asked here today to talk about this really important travel ban impacting our local community and specifically the immigrants among us. I am particularly honored to be here. I have, I mean, I read the Sahan Journal every day, and you know, it's really key for clients. It's really key for our community. It's really key for getting their stories out there. I was previously on the executive committee for the local Minnesota Dakotas chapter of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, and we just honored Mukhtar Ibrahim, the former CEO and the founder of Sahan Journal, for his incredible work in really getting the stories of immigrants out there. So it was an honor to be asked here today to talk about this really important issue facing our community today.
Thank you so much, Matthew. I didn't realize that you were a fan until today. So.
A super fan.
Thank you so much for joining us. Again, thank you guys so much. If any of our chatters have a question, you guys are more than free to ask them into our chat. As we go on through the broadcast, we'll be able to ask them or ask our panelists anything that you got. All right. Without further ado, let's get into the conversation. Yeah. So on June 5th, the Trump administration implemented a new travel ban, blocking entry to the United States for people from 12 countries. You know, that list includes some countries with large immigrant communities in Minnesota, specifically Somalia, Myanmar, Eritrea, Afghanistan, and Sudan. Matthew, can you tell us more about the travel ban in layman's terms? You know, what does it mean?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much for that cue up. I think it's important before we dive into where we are now to look back to 2017, because when most people hear travel ban, they think the first Trump administration. So we lived it, right? We saw those pictures. We experienced families getting torn apart at the Minneapolis airport because in January of 2017, January 27th to be exact, that travel ban was announced and went into effect immediately so that families, including some from Somalia, coming over, they left and there was no travel ban in place. It was announced and implemented by the time they landed on the ground here. So that was obviously a hugely impactful travel ban, and it went into effect immediately, and it barred all entry from individuals from certain countries. As everyone likely knows, there were also then several reiterations. There were legal challenges from the get-go. Great attorneys here in our local communities, as well as around the country, fought those travel bans and ended up taking them all the way to the United States Supreme Court. The third travel ban, the one that went into effect in September of 2017 then, was upheld by the Supreme Court. By that time, it had been expanded beyond the Muslim travel ban. The initial one was really all Muslim countries. They added North Korea, they added Venezuela, and with that, were able to pass legal muster. And so then that was in effect really throughout the rest of the Trump term. The travel ban was then lifted later on in the Biden administration, and here we are today with the newly announced and the newly effective travel ban. There are some key differences. As you mentioned, Alberto, it was announced in the beginning of June and then went into effect about a week later, effective June 9th. I do think it's important that people know this is more of a visa ban than a travel ban. There are some key distinctions that do make it a little different than the 2017 bans. So first of all, it applies to individuals from certain countries who were outside of the U.S. and not issued a valid visa as of June 9th when it became effective. As you mentioned, there's a full travel ban that suspends immigrants and non-immigrants from certain countries. As you mentioned, many of those are represented in pretty large communities here in the Twin Cities: Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. All of those have that full travel ban. Then there's this other tier where there's a partial travel ban. And again, this is a key distinction that we didn't have in 2017. So that partial travel ban affects individuals from certain countries who have certain visa categories. So individuals from Burundi, Cuba, Laos, Sierra Leone, Togo, Turkmenistan, and Venezuela, they're subject to this partial travel ban. And that partial travel ban suspends entry of individuals with certain visa categories, like a B1, B2 visa, your standard business visitor visa. It suspends the F1 student visa and the M1 educational visa, as well as J1 exchange program visa holders. And it reduces the periods of visas that have already been issued. For example, most individuals, when they apply for a B1, B2 visa in most countries around the world, they'll get a 10-year visa. So even if the visa stamp in their passport says it's valid for 10 years, it's going to be limited pursuant to that partial travel ban that's now in effect.
So I want to circle back a little bit. You mentioned that like this travel ban happened as well. Some people were even in the air, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is this? May be a specific example, but what happens if you're already en route to the United States? You're already in the air. You've boarded your plane from Afghanistan to, I don't know, Minneapolis. What happens when you land?
Yeah, I mean, and that was just the devastating effect of that first round of travel bans in 2017, because there was no advance notice. And it went into effect immediately, and it just suspended entry for even people that had valid visas. They came legally, right? They had everything lined up, but when they landed, they were no longer allowed to enter the U.S. and pass through Customs and Border Protection. Here, there was kind of a 5-day window, and so obviously anyone who didn't have visas, who could get them, it was incumbent upon them to get them as soon as possible. People who already had visas were unaffected unless they were in those specific visa categories for the partial suspension. And there are other carve-outs, which we can get into in a moment. But thankfully, at least there was that brief window so that people could get their affairs in order and try to get here as soon as possible. And that certainly gets to some of the advice we're giving people. This time there was a 5-day window. Last time there wasn't. Who knows what will happen in future travel bans? And so it's really important to plan, just knowing there is risk always.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, of course.
Jelani, have you heard of like specific experiences of someone landing in the United States and having to experience being told like you got to go back, you can't stay?
Oh, the first travel ban, there was just so many. There were many families. We've actually had, I think, Senator Klobuchar and at the time, I think Al Franken were specifically working on a case where there was a mother expecting her little kid to come over, and the child was turned around. So it was horrible. But this last one, we did have, obviously, we had the 5-day grace period, and unfortunately for many of the people who could get getting a visa is very difficult. Those things are almost like, you never know when they're going to land, especially from the countries that are mentioned here, including Somalia. Sometimes the visa, you're told that you're going to get your visa, but then it may take another 4 months, 6 months before that actual visa you get, and the next steps is to bring you over. But we did hear, actually, that we did have some folks that were able to make it.
Excuse me, Jelani.
Yep.
Could you just speak up a little bit more?
Yeah, we were able to get few people that actually showed up last minute and were able to come to the United States, and so that little bit of a warning helped a lot of folks that could make it here to be able to do that. But unfortunately, so many people were expecting the ban to go in effect, and unfortunately, when it was announced, it was just another delay of their plan to be here with loved ones who they've been rightfully applied and went through the process, and we're just waiting for the formal process to execute on a visa.
So, Jelani, this travel ban impacts many nations with predominantly Muslim populations,
Mhm.
including Iran, Libya, Somalia, and Yemen, like you're saying. You're the executive director of the Minnesota chapter, the Council of American Islamic Relations, otherwise known as CARE. You know, what does this ban look like from the perspective of a Muslim person?
Well, we know, first of all, this is a continuation, as Matt mentioned, this is a continuation of the Muslim African ban. The overwhelming majority are Muslim countries. The overwhelming majority are African, black immigrants. And that always has been the case. In fact, the first Trump administration, Trump made many statements against Africa, and he continues to do that today, and target those countries. And so, as Muslims, this is that continuing targeting, and we know that they use certain reasons of why the ban was even issued now, connecting it to incidents in Boulder and anti-Semitism incident in Boulder, and what we do know from many of those individuals that would have benefited if this ban was not impacted or not enforced are folks who have been living in refugee camps for 20 plus years. Many of them, some of them were not even born in the country that they're being banned from. They just literally are refugees living in another country, but their citizenship is origin back to the country that they were family came from. And some of those people have been vetted. They're literally been living their entire life in a refugee camp. Their entire history of their last 20 years is in that refugee camp. The most vetted, the most, if there's any process that is vetting for security, those are the individuals that have had the most. Yet these are the people that are most impacted.
Exactly.
Matthew, can I ask for some clarification on this? I want to make sure I'm understanding the situation correctly. So, does the ban impact a person's nation of origin or where they are staying? So, like, if I live in the United States right now, I have family. I am from Mexico. If there was a travel ban on Mexico, would I be able to travel? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So it is based on nationality.
Okay.
So if an individual has dual nationality, dual citizenship, that is one of the exceptions. So they kind of you get kind of the benefit of you can trade up basically, right? If you're a citizen of two countries and one of those is not covered by the travel ban, then you would just want to travel on that passport and you could come, and that is one of the carve-outs. And again, as devastating as this is, the inclusion of some specific carve-outs this time and some specific exceptions does make it much better for individuals that are in those gray areas. But there are vast populations, millions of people around the world that don't fall into a gray area, right? Even if they've never lived in that country of origin, whatever their nationality is, that's what applies to them. And so if they fall under one of these, even if they've never been to that country, they would be subject to this travel ban.
Jelani, are you able to share some of the experiences that communities are having right now?
Yeah, so first of all, we've seen the onslaught by ICE and this administration to target immigration, where everyone is feeling a sense of, at any moment, some ICE can come to your door and snatch you. So therefore, that fear already existed. And then this ban, what it did, it just added to that. And it made more real that these policies that have been talked about are now actually going to be implemented. I think the difference is that we were a little bit more prepared. Not to say that nobody can be prepared for this ban, but yet a lot more prepared to know that was going to come down the pipeline. I think most of us heard of many variations of this through leaks and things like that, and so. But from the community perspective, I think immediately as soon as this went in, a lot of people were just wanting to know what countries, who's impacted, can I travel, and some of the bigger questions that I think Matt just alluded to are the ones that people were really wanted to know. Like, if I am Somali American, can I travel to Somalia? Or if I have a green card, can I leave? Does it impact me? If I have my visa in my hand, does it impact me, or does it impact if I don't have my visa? So those are things that are a lot more clear. But I think one thing that I want to share with folks to understand is that there are so many so many individuals that were initially impacted by the first travel ban, who then waited 4 years in hopes that their process would be come to completion so they can come. And a lot of those people never made it. So even during the Biden administration, we did not get the type of addressing the backlog that the Trump administration did. So there are a lot more people that are now banned twice. Technically, they were banned once, and then they couldn't come here those 4 years, and now they're banned twice. And when I say that, I feel for the families where they have an aging parent who they're trying to bring, or who now they may never see because that aging parent may regretfully pass away because of just the 8 years of waiting and beyond. So the backlog in itself is a secondary pain that many people are dealing with, and people are sometimes even giving up hope with the idea that they could come legally through the legal proper channels to come to the United States, and again, mostly impacted by family reunification.
Yeah, I think that is really important to note. So much of this and so much of the coverage of this travel ban is really focused on people outside of the United States. But I think what Jelani mentioned is really key. So many people directly impacted this are in the United States, right? We just lived through a worldwide pandemic that affected people's ability to travel freely. This is a man-made disaster, right? But it has the same impact. As Jelani was mentioning, if somebody's parents are aging, if somebody has a marriage that they wish to celebrate and be there with loved ones, if someone's grandmother is dying or dies, passes, their ability to go to that funeral is going to be directly impacted by whether or not they're a citizen of one of these countries and whether or not they have a visa and it remains valid to this day. I think it's important that people note, again, this is primarily driven by the visa process. A visa is what's needed, not to leave the U.S., but to get back in. And so, again, so much of the coverage is focused on people outside of the U.S., really wanting to get in. But so many of the people, including those living here in our community in the Twin Cities and throughout greater Minnesota and the Midwest, those individuals, their ability to travel freely and go back and to visit and do trips that maybe they put off during COVID, maybe they put off during their graduate studies, all of those reasons, now they're not able to travel yet again.
One thing I want to add is that I think there's also an additional fear that is being implemented by this administration in an effort to not let people even travel. And so we want to clarify that for folks. So number one, consult with your attorney, consult with an immigration attorney. We'll provide some of that support as well. But, there are people who are American citizens, who are also considering not traveling just because of the idea of a travel ban being effective, even though it does not impact them.
Thank you guys so much for that. That was a lot. And like you're saying, this is a daunting and scary situation. If you are just now joining us, first of all, thank you so much. You're tuning into Instagram Live with Sahan Journal. Right now, we are discussing the the June 5th Trump travel ban affecting 12 countries, specifically Afghanistan, Myanmar, Chad, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen. If you have questions about the Trump travel ban, we have two lovely guests, Jaylani Hussein from CARE, Minnesota, and Matthew Webster, a senior immigration attorney. Feel free to ask your questions to these guests. We'll be able to read them out throughout the broadcast. So I want to get a little more of a definition. I just listed off 12 countries, but some of them have what's called a partial ban. Matthew, can you help me understand what is a partial ban?
Yeah, so that partial ban really affects certain countries that fall under it and who are applying for or have certain visa categories. And those visa categories impacted are the B1, B2, so kind of your standard business, tourism, visitor visas, F, M, and J visas that are your standard student, exchange visitor visas. Those are the visas that are impacted. So it's not all visas. So your employment visas, say somebody from Turkmenistan or a Venezuelan business owner who's here on an employment visa, those are not impacted. It's limited to certain visa categories. The full travel ban suspends all visas, immigrant and non-immigrant visas from those 12 countries. An immigrant visa is a visa that someone would get from a consulate based on a family-based process, say a loved one, a spouse, or a parent applies for them. They go through that process. Sometimes they wait 20 to 25 years. Think El Salvador or Mexico, those are backlogged to the early 2000s. So they could have waited all that time. They get an immigrant visa and their passport. What would normally happen is then they'd have 6 months to enter the U.S., and once they do, then a green card would be issued and sent to them. Individuals with those immigrant visas or applying for those immigrant visas from those full travel ban countries are not able to travel. For individuals from those countries covered by the partial travel ban, they'd still be able to do so.
I've got a question from the chat real quick. We did cover it earlier, but I think it's still worth re-upping. So they ask, for someone who has double nationality, is it safe for them to travel outside of the country, and will they be allowed to re-enter? I think we said yes. Can you walk me through that process?
So I do have to note, I am an attorney. I have to advise that I'm not providing legal advice. I would strongly recommend, Jelani mentioned this, so I didn't have to, but I will too. You should talk to a trusted immigration attorney, just because this is an ever-evolving issue. This could change even by the time we're done with today's broadcast. What I will say is dual citizens are an exception to this particular travel ban. And what that means is if someone is a citizen of a country covered by one of the travel bans and a citizen of a country not covered by one of the travel bans, then they would not fall under this travel ban. There are many reasons, though, someone could experience issues traveling or applying for a visa. If someone doesn't have a visa and they travel outside of the United States, they would need to go through several different gatekeepers in the U.S. bureaucratic process. First, they'd have to apply for a visa, which means they'd be applying through the Department of State. They would have kind of the full analysis there with a consular officer at a U.S. consulate or embassy in their home country. Then they would take that visa and their passport and present at Customs and Border Protection, either at a land port of entry, Canadian or Mexican border, or more likely in a U.S. in an airport, like here in Minneapolis, St. Paul. That's crossing the port of entry, going through Customs and Border Protection, and then there's an independent analysis by that Customs and Border Protection officer. So anytime someone travels abroad, they are then subjecting themselves to additional review, and so it's really important if anyone has any immigration issues, criminal issues, or really any concerns, that they do meet with a trusted immigration attorney to get counsel on that. And again, realizing that this is a moving target. We're talking here today. It could change. And in fact, we already do have indications that there are things on the horizon. Egypt was one of the countries that was called out in the initial travel ban as the fact that the U.S. is reviewing their screening and vetting procedures, and they could be added to a future travel ban. Jelani hinted at this, but there was a New York Times article that kind of leaked a preliminary travel ban. Many of those countries were not included in this first iteration of the travel ban, but if you're a citizen of one of those countries, you would want to pause before engaging in international travel, because you might have 5 days to try to get back here. If it was announced with 5 days effective, like in this case, it could be effective immediately, like in 2017. So you just want to plan ahead. The U.S. also has set up a way in which to review additional countries to be added to the travel ban. So this initial list will be reviewed after 90 days and kind of on an ongoing basis. And additional countries will be reviewed on an ongoing basis as well. And so I think that's really important. There are close to 30 countries that really span A to Z that could also be listed in a future travel ban coming out as soon as August. The United States has indicated that they take issue with some of their screening and vetting procedures and their passport validity and biometrics. And so that could be coming into effect as soon as August. It's a long list, but I think it's important that people know.
Thank you so much. That's a lot. Jelani and Matthew, you actually mentioned this earlier. Jelani, you were talking about earlier how CARE is able to offer some resources. Could you touch base and let me know what resources CARE offers for immigrants?
Yeah, so first of all, we in Minnesota and here in the Twin Cities, we have really great organizations that provide free for those obviously who needed immigration, and that is Immigrant Law Center, Advocates for Human Rights, and there are a few more that are available, Legal Aid and others. And CARE, we are among those organizations that provide that, so they can call our office and be able to usher that. We are actually in the process of hiring a full-time immigration attorney, but we are able to answer some of the basic questions. And if somebody needs additional, we'll provide that resource. We're also going to provide know your rights trainings to provide that with attorneys. And then also we'll do a brief legal clinic for folks who have those kind of questions to go through and be able to get some answers. And so we're providing as much resources available, and we encourage people to take advantage of that. There are a lot of other resources available, like I mentioned. And so I one of the number one things, I think Matt and I agree, and we keep repeating, is that we want people to be well informed. What we don't want people is to be uninformed or take information on social media or somebody said this and I remember not even only the last travel ban. I remember in the middle of a talk, somebody in the back of the, the audience was like, "Well, I just saw that Hawaii did something, and yes, the court stopped it," or So, as Matt mentioned, sometimes there's a lot of changing things happens. Attorneys and organizations that are on the ground are going to know that, and so it's making sure that you're well connected. At the same time, we don't want people to be over fearful. Again, some of the things that this administration is doing is those tactics. They want to make everybody be afraid and have these anxieties. We just this is a good practice, regardless whether there's a travel ban or not, just to always consult with attorneys to get some better information.
So, thank you so much, Jelani. I'm going to follow up on that in just a second. If you are just now tuning in, first of all, thank you again so much. You're tuning into Sahan's IG Live, where we're talking about Trump's travel ban, which went into effect was first enacted on June 5th. Make sure I have that line.
Announced June 5th.
Announced June 5th. Thank you. With us today, we have Jelani Hussein of CARE Minnesota and Matthew Webster, a senior immigration attorney. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you guys have any questions at all for our guests, feel free to drop those into the chat. We'll be asking them throughout the broadcast. You mentioned in your last answer that you were your CARE Minnesota is planning a Know Your Rights Zoom event. You said before this broadcast, though, that had to be delayed.
Yeah, so it's just normal technical things that we have to keep updating. So we're doing these very frequently. So we just encourage people to check our website, and the latest one should be available. So we were scheduled for one this Friday, but we have to postpone it. But yeah, that's a great place to get, kind of more accurate information. We may not be, those sessions are not the greatest place to get your individual case answered, but at least a great place to say, hey, what's going on? What's the latest thing? And so yes, that's why I encourage people, get real information from trusted sources. You will feel a lot better. And also, one of the things we're also asking is, we're asking individuals in your small circle of like family and network to be able to share that. So maybe you come and attended, others cannot, but then now you could be a really good resource. And one of that ways is also connecting people back to trusted organizations.
That's like expanding a web.
Absolutely.
So on the topic of misinformation and disinformation, do either of you two have like recommended resources? You can't say Sahan Journal, by the way.
Sahan Journal. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, like where's a reliable place for someone to be receiving information?
Well, first of all, not a headline and not social media, not just some random stuff, because people are putting things out there sometimes not just because they want to, just the nature. Oh, I just saw this and maybe I'll share it. And so that's the first thing. We in Minnesota, like I said, in the Twin Cities, we have really great immigrant rights organizations, both on advocacy side, but also legal representation. And so Immigrant Law Center in Minnesota is one of our bigger ones, Advocates for Human Rights. I'm going to go on the website here in a minute and run off of them. But there are a number of these wonderful organizations that provide legal service, including legal aid for folks who are seeking that. There are other organizations that are also providing some context. Now, nationally, we have the National Immigrant Law Center as well that provides information. So being plugged in. Now, here's something I'm going to say, because I know the audience for Sahan Journal is not just immigrants, it's also the allies. So we want allies to have correct information and to help people. Sometimes you'll have, your neighbors will ask, you want to be able to be resourceful. You also want to share something on social media. Well, share content and access to these organizations instead of sharing a sensational New York Times headline, Trump is going to do X, Y, and Z, which we really don't know yet. But, New York has to, Times has to sell some paper, like Sahan Journal telling the truth. No, I'm just kidding. I'll leave it there. But you get the point, like, most importantly, we want to make sure that that article that has a sensational headline does not necessarily interpret into legal representation of legal. Where we just, so allies and folks who are learning about this is really important that you're also educated, you learn. You don't have to know all the facts, but at least know where to go and where to share information with.
So you're highly advising people actually read a news article rather than just look at
Go beyond the
Yeah.
headline, unfortunately.
Yeah.
There's more words down there.
Yeah. Additional organizations, SMERLS, the Southern Minnesota Regional Legal Services Agency, also has great resources, and the International Institute of Minnesota, as well as any of the refugee resettlement agencies. So there are lots of great local resources, as well as the National Immigrant Legal Center that Jelani mentioned. Great resources, Know Your Rights, materials, red cards, that are kind of Know Your Rights cards that people can keep on themselves at all times if they're concerned about some of the other things coming up.
I want to pivot a little bit. I'm thinking about enforcement of the travel bans right now. You know, how does the enforcement of a ban actually work? Like, are people just turned away at customs and told get back on the plane, buy another ticket, go? What does that look like?
Yeah. It depends a little bit. I mean, some of this is going to be enforced, as I mentioned, by the consulates, right? They're not going to be issuing visas for those countries. So in effect, the countries where they have the full travel ban, they're not going to be issuing any more immigrant or non-immigrant visas, which is all of their visas. So they basically shut down that aspect of the consulate or embassy in that country. For individuals that come to the U.S., there are some countries in the world where they have what's called pre-flight clearance, where they go through Customs and Border Protection in their home country. Ireland is an example. Canada has it at their airports. I think a lot of this is going to be administered by the carriers, in fact, so the airlines themselves, because otherwise people would be coming all the way to the U.S. And then getting turned around at Minneapolis airport when they go through customs and then returned. So I think the agent would often be through the airlines. You always have to put in your passport. You have to show that you have a valid basis for coming to the U.S. So I think that's the mechanism for people who already have visas but are subject to the travel ban notwithstanding.
And I've had the experience, to be honest with you, traveling to the United States is not like traveling to anywhere else.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it just seems that, and I've had this multiple times. I remember I was coming back from Ghana, of all places, and I'm a United States citizen, and I remember the airline staff were like, well, you're going to America, you should have been here an hour and a half. Their own system locks us away, and and he's like, but if you went to Italy today, like I could have got you a boarding pass, right? And I've traveled during the pandemic time, 2021, and I think I needed like a new COVID test or something, and I got it, but then I missed the window, and they're like, yeah. And they told me like America is headache, like everybody else is within 30 minutes you can get your boarding pass.
Yeah.
But I'm traveling to America, even a United States citizen, the systems of the airline system takes even much, much longer.
Mm-hmm. It's a headache of a process. I thought that was everyone else hated going to the airport. It's just us. Looks like I've got a question from the chat. This one seems to be coming from an ally. Are there legislative moves we can make, even locally, that the community can advocate for?
So I'll start. So nationally, there is a No Ban Act. There's a policy that has been pushed now, obviously, every session in an effort to create really legislation that does not allow presidents to create, racist policies like this. So we're hopeful on that. Obviously, it's going to be an uphill battle. I think statewide, there are opportunities to create support systems for immigrants, and also states to continue to do that. But unfortunately, with some of the federal policies, it's a lot difficult to deal with travel because that's predominantly dominated by the federal government. And so, but I would just say continue to engage with organizations like CARE and Immigrant Alliance, others, because there are going to be opportunities where we could potentially do other supportive things from a state perspective. I know this year, undocumented immigrants lost or they're going to be losing access to health care. We have, as a community, have to be really vigilant and understand the impact of these local policies as much as anything else. And also city policy. It doesn't have to be state, city, county. What is your county doing? What is your city doing? And among other things. And so being alert, staying alert to recognize what's happening in your own local town and city is important. as well as even jurisdictions like school boards and other things like that are important. That some of them are trying to figure out ways to even make it a lot more difficult for folks who are either undocumented or on different types of immigration status.
Yeah, I think it's important that people know these are executive actions, right? It's the federal government, it's the president making these determinations, and so contacting your legislators, I think that's important. This isn't legislative action, so it's not a law that was passed. It didn't have the notice and comment period. It's not regulation, so it could be unwound today if the president chose to act. So there are ways in which to do that, and I think really starting with your local legislator, contacting them, letting them know the way that this is impacting our community, the way that it's impacting you as an individual, or if you're an ally, the way that it's impacting your friends and your community. I think that's really important, that individuals making these big sweeping decisions know the impact they're having and the impact that they're having in with constituents across the United States. And in particular, if it's from his party, I think it probably matters a lot. If it's from a swing district, if it's from a district that voted for Trump, and he's hearing through legislators, through Congress, the negative impacts that travel bans have on these particular individuals in this particular community, I think that's really important.
So I wanna circle over to international students. If someone is studying here but they're originally from Afghanistan, how is the ban affecting them?
Yeah, so the big issue here is that visa ban, right? So individuals who are here in the U.S. can continue to study as long as they can continue to extend their F1 status. We've seen a huge push to revoke student visas, to terminate their SEVIS record, which is their student records and reporting to the government. So we've seen that. We've seen that here in Minnesota, at University of Mankato, at the University of Minnesota. We've seen it nationwide. Those are being litigated, and they keep getting overturned, those decisions, because because they're unlawful. But individuals who are otherwise in the U.S. have valid F1 student status. They can continue to stay here. The problem becomes if they travel abroad and they're subject to one of these visa travel bans. If they need to get a visa and they don't have one, they wouldn't be able to get back in the country in F1 status. So that's really important. It also is going to impact individuals who, had been accepted, say, by the University of Minnesota and were planning to come here to start this fall. Outside of this travel ban, there was also a separate pause on F, M, and J1 student visa processing for about a 3-month period. They just reopened it last week, and we're starting to see some individuals able to schedule visa appointments. But that is going to have a huge impact on the student population, including here in Minnesota. It was announced, I apologize, I said it was several months. It was announced in May, and then the social media vetting went into effect last week. And so basically, they paused the F, M, and J visa processing to create new social media vetting tools that now they're going to be implementing for these visas, and we think probably across all visa categories eventually. But what that means is individuals are able to schedule now, but we anticipate it being a little bit longer before you get your passport and visa back. Normally we say 1 to 2 weeks after your appointment, you should get it unless your case is placed at administrative processing. It might be longer now, depending on how long the social media vetting takes, and it's too soon to tell, really.
Right. I remember reading from a New York Times article. I'm sorry, Jaylani, that some international students are even required to just keep their social media pages like publicly available.
That's what we're hearing reports of, is that they're being required to have them open and public for the visa processing process at the consulates.
So
I want to add one thing about that, because I think
Go ahead.
there's a context about international students that many people don't realize. International students are not usually on scholarship. They're actually bringing their own money and spending into our economy. They are most likely supporting rural communities, because a lot of our colleges, like in Mankato, other places, are small, urban, rural communities, and they're bringing in a lot of money, millions and millions of dollars. And so I want people to wake up and realize that this is not just some immigrants and some, this could potentially be that your local subway is going to close, and your local,
local funding relies on these students as
Yeah,
well.
and especially the smaller you are, all of a sudden you lose $45 million that were coming annually to support your local economy.
Mm-hmm.
That, especially in a recession and the challenges and inflation, all of a sudden now small towns are going to really feel it. And these are small towns that actually could potentially push back against these policies, especially most of them voting red to the Trump administration. So I want people to wake up to that, so that that could potentially happen in the next 3 to 4 months. That also some students that were planning to come, because students graduated and left. There's some students replacing them. So all of a sudden that money is going to be gone.
Yeah, I do. We have a large healthcare immigration practice, and this is particularly relevant for healthcare as well. It's not just an immigration issue. Jelani touched on it. It's an economic issue. It's also a healthcare issue. Starting on July 1, the U.S. is expecting about 10,000 fellows and residents to begin their clinical training in the United States. Those individuals are rounding on patients from day one. There was that pause in processing. Those people were probably already on shifts, already scheduled to be assisting U.S. patients in need of life-saving medical care. So this isn't just kind of an amorphous theoretical travel ban. This is something that's impacting our local communities. It's impacting our local and national economy, and it's impacting our ability to provide health care to my family, to your family, to my grandparents, right? Like it's impacting people where they feel it most.
It's a very tangible and legitimate problem that you
Exactly.
can just see and feel in your communities. I'm going to follow that up in just a second. I need to send out a little reminder to our audience. I do see we have a couple more people tuning in now. First of all, thank you so much. Today we're talking about Trump's travel ban. What do you want to know about that? Tell us in the chat. We've got two wonderful experts here answering all of your questions, all of your curiosities. So I wanted to go a bit more on healthcare, actually. You mentioned, or sorry, let me retrain my thought. Sorry. I was wondering, so I have family who come to the United States for medical treatment. My grandmother has bum knee,
Mm-hmm.
How would her situation be affected if she was traveling from a banned country? She's already made the appointments. She's been seeing a doctor for years. Is she still going to be able to receive medical treatment?
So that's a great question. I mean, part of it would depend on if she was a country covered by the full or the partial travel ban. Most individuals coming to the U.S. for medical care, they're coming on a B1, B2, just kind of a visitor visa. If you were from a country where those were now no longer valid, you'd be impacted. If you're from a country, that's suspending all immigrant and non-immigrant visas, and you still need to apply for one, you need to travel on one, then you'd be impacted. Yeah, and I will say, it is important, as we've mentioned a couple times today, to talk to an attorney. There are theoretical exceptions to the travel bans, both the full and the partial. It's too soon to tell what exactly those are going to be. I can tell you last time around, there were what are called national interest exceptions. So it wasn't really humanitarian. It wasn't for your own health. It was for things like business travel, investors, individuals working on defense or critical infrastructure industries, public health, athletes, dependents, and staff. So individuals working in providing public health, medical devices, or physicians, that sort of thing, were able to apply for and get national interest exceptions last time. So we don't exactly know what those exceptions will be this time and how those will be adjudicated. They'll certainly be discretionary and kind of a case-by-case analysis. But I do want people to know it's not necessarily the end if you're outside the U.S., if your loved ones are outside the U.S. and you fall under one of these travel bans. Again, you'd want to talk with someone to see if there's a way, if you have dual citizenship. I think it's also important, Jelani mentioned lawful permanent residence, and we were talking before, we've never been contacted by U.S. citizens and lawful permanent residents like we have since January. People are scared. And these aren't people, here visiting for a short period of time. These aren't students, who are here for a temporary time. These are individuals who have gone sometimes decades to get that lawful permanent resident status, to finally have a green card in their hand, to finally be a U.S. citizen. And we're getting calls from those people asking, does this apply to me? What does this mean for me and my family? It is important to note that the travel ban, there's an exception. It does not apply to lawful permanent residents. So a lawful permanent resident is someone who has what's called, on the street, a green card, right? So someone with a green card is not impacted by this. But their loved ones might be.
I have a almost completely unrelated question. Um, do either of you guys like soccer?
Yes,
The
sir.
World Cup.
Oh yeah.
Well, and right
Um,
now we've got the Club World Cup going on. We've got the Gold Cup. It's real. It's impacting people.
yeah. That's what I'm not a soccer fan. I wish I was. I just never got into it. I meant to, but I forgot. Um, I guess we have the World Cup being hosted in well, North America, Canada, United States, and Mexico. Um, but events held in the United States, there may be some countries that are banned. How is that going to affect the athletes? Do
Yeah.
you guys know?
So that's a good question. There is a carve out for athletes and coaches for the World Cup and the Olympics. Those are specifically called out in other events. So obviously the World Cup will be here as well as in Canada and Mexico next year. The Olympics are coming as well. So the athletes and kind of their coaches and immediate support staff are exempt from this travel ban. But what makes the World Cup special, what makes the
Audience.
Olympics special, are the people in the stands holding the flags, cheering for those athletes. So when you look at some of these countries on the current travel ban, as well as some of them on the proposed travel ban, those are countries with teams that have already qualified, or teams that are in the qualifying and may well be here and have no fans able to travel to the United States. Thankfully, the United States is a nation of immigrants, so I'm sure there will be a lot of fans here already who will come out to cheer them. But what makes this a special event? You know, I got to go to the World Cup in 1994. I will never forget that. I got to go to a match in D.C. and it was one of those life-changing events. Getting to see the passion that these people had for soccer. I was it was totally new in rural America where I grew up. So it was kind of like, oh, this is just something you do. But to see the passion and the history and the stories these people brought, I mean, that's what got me excited about soccer. And that's, I think, what'll be missing. The people not being able to travel to participate in this. This really, I mean, the World Cup, it's really a world congress where people get together, they put aside their differences, and they get to cheer for this thing that represents their country and their people.
And also all the money. I mean, how many
That too.
millions of people travel for this? And so, it undercuts those countries. And so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, just imagine a soccer stadium with an empty
Mhm.
quarter seats empty because of those folks who are not able to come and participate. And again, it really drives home
Hmm.
the idea that you will allow the team, but not allow the people that team represents. That's
It's
just
a huge disconnect.
huge
Mhm.
oxymoron and completely idiotic.
Thank you so much for that reaction. And also thank you everyone for joining us today for our Sahan Live. Today we're still talking about Trump's travel ban with Jaylani Hussein of CARE Minnesota and Matthew Webster, a senior immigration attorney at Frederickson and Byron. Byron?
That's right.
Byron. Uh, we want to know from you guys as well. What questions do you have? What do you want to know about the travel ban? Feel free to send them into the chat, and we'll be able to ask them. Jelani, I'm gonna pivot again
Mhm.
for the fourth time probably. You know, how does Care Minnesota look at this year's travel ban versus say 2017's?
I think first and foremost, we want to move forward, and we feel like we didn't. We went right back to where we are. In fact, now we added more countries, and and the same logic, or the, I would say, illogic or racist tones about this policy are returning, scapegoating Muslims, targeting black people, whether domestically or foreign from Africa, um, doubling down on those racist, xenophobic policies. We would wish that we would not be here today, after going through 8 years since the last time this was enacted. And so I think that's the first thing. The second thing is that, it, it, I will say, from an optimistic perspective, it's another chance for us to get it right. Meaning, we need people to wake up. We need Americans to wake up and realize what this means. The Constitution protects individuals' religion against government action. We believe this is one of those things. Unfortunately, this Supreme Court I believe is wrong. We believe is wrong in their decision on the first Trump ban. Um, but irregardless, I think it's an opportunity for us to realize we have a lot of work, and we did not accomplish those. We didn't move the country forward 4 years after the Trump administration, and so as we look forward ahead, we need to realize that this can't happen. And for Muslims and those impacted by this ban, I think we need to fight even harder to ensure that this does not happen again, not to us or to not anybody else. And that's part of the policies of the federal policy of the No Ban Act, and among other things. But I think unfortunately for some of the families and many of the people that I've talked to, they're resilient, but at the same time they're feeling that sense. And to Matt's point, for the first time, I think we're hearing from folks who we've never heard from. Like, this was really an immigration ban, visa ban, and now we're having citizens afraid to travel to countries that are not named right now. We're having folks ask more questions than they've ever did before. We are having people worried about other policies that could be attached to this, and we've already lost some TPS programs, and we don't know where the other TPS are going to land. And these are people who are legally here, who have a legal pathway here. So there are other aspects of this ban that I think people need to wake up to. So, and for the first time, I think America needs to look at we need to look in a mirror, and we look at each other and realize that the immigration system in this country is broke for a reason, and we need to fix it. And I blame both political parties for failing to deliver on really a compassionate and a more realistic immigration plan for Americans, folks who have lived here all of their life, who have worked, who are part of our economy, who make what America is. I just remind folks, most people probably went to a graduation this past couple of weeks, to high school graduation, whatever. And America is becoming more diverse. You could look around every class and you see those students, who are celebrating a moment of milestone among themselves. And just imagine now, getting on the stage, and some students getting on the stage, and some students not being able to get on the stage, and some parents are being allowed to. That's the reality of America. Maybe that ceremony we didn't see that, but that is the reality. Right? Imagining some parents can't come in, they're caged somewhere, like children are not allowed, and the stage, some people are wearing certain things, other people, just imagine like that was the reality. If we could replay the actual graduation from a mindset of exactly where America is, or even what America could be. I think I see in those graduations what America is going to be, a generation of people lining up, who graduating together, a class that sees each other, values each other, empathizes with each other. And at the end of the day, they say we are the class of so-and-so high school. And that is the American future. What America we live in today is an America very divided, polarized, an America that does not see each other. And I think this is a moment that we use these opportunities. Immigration, what we're doing to the immigrant population is a reflection of what we're doing as Americans to each other.
I don't know how you manage to be disheartening and inspiring at the same time.
It's my passive-aggressive Minnesotan.
Thank you so much,
Comes out very
Jelani.
thick.
We have less than 7 minutes in our broadcast right now. I'm going to ask our chat one last time. If you have any questions you would like to ask, feel free to drop them in the chat. We're still talking about the Trump travel ban. Otherwise, I'm going to keep guiding the conversation myself. I can do all the heavy lifting. I'm more than happy to. Jelani, you talked about Muslim community fighting back, but still feeling, I guess, tired. Is that a good word to use about the circumstance?
Very tired. But at the same time, sometimes I think we realize that when you address Islamophobia, you don't address just Islamophobia. You address all forms of racism. When you address anti-Semitism, you don't just address anti-Semitism. You address all forms of hate. When you address anti-blackness, you address all, because they're all the same.
So then what does fighting back look like from your perspective?
I think the first most important thing is, and this is something that I'm passionate about, I think we need Americans to talk to each other. We need neighbors to talk to one another. We need to wake up and realize that we have to inoculate the worst version of us that is the loudest oftentimes. And that's that's not the reality, where most Minnesotans can wake up every morning living on a cul-de-sac and look at each other and they're just worried about getting their kids on a bus and, getting through the regular day and talking about the snow, whatever. So the reality is, when we really talk to each other and we see each other who we are, we realize that we have a lot more in common. We care deeply about each other and we help each other. But the problem right now is we're not talking to each other. And we are allowing the worst voices on both sides of the political spectrum to define the relationships that have never been really created. And so therefore, we've now lived as enemies. We see each other with almost, we can't empathize. Where, for example, right now, as we talked about, this is about economy more than it is anything else. Imagine now you're a Subway owner in Mankato. Your entire business, 15% of your business is international students. And all of a sudden now next year, you can't make the payment and your business goes under, right? What did you do? You turned on your own neighbors and now it impacting your bottom line. And so that's what I mean. I feel like we just need to, this summer and just any opportunity, we need to talk to each other. And one thing I recommend is, don't talk to the loud, crazy, very loud person. They represent less than 1%. Talk to the head nodders, the people who are not talking. Let's just have a real empathetic conversation. And let us not be about a single item that we all disagree on. Let's just talk about, what are you trying to do? What are your children doing? How do we? And then let's have those authentic relationship and conversation. And then we need to let our elected officials know exactly where America is. Majority of America do not support a lot of these policies. But we're also not taking the ownership of letting elected officials know where we stand. I may not agree with those persons, but I value them. I want them to be here. They help me. These are part of my neighbors, and I stand with my neighbor. We need those type of conversations because I really feel that we can't keep saying we're polarized. We have to do something about it. And I feel like that is the experiment that we have to spend on. At the same time, we have to take the best when we find. I mean, we just had in New York, a young Muslim man potentially becoming the next mayor of New York, and that's an incredible, aspiring story. But there is hope in this country, and we just need to have real conversations with real people. And we cannot have the conversation with those who we already are having conversation. We're not going to go anywhere if we continue to have a conversation with those we agree with or those who we feel comfortable. It starts with the weather. So I'll play it. You just randomly show up to the next minute and be like, hey, well, it's been raining a lot today. And then start there. And then you say, well, how about them twins? I think they're horrible. And then keep digging into. And
it has to build some, but it has to
have
start
you tried one of those
somewhere.
sambusas or is it the samosas they call it? Oh, the Somalians. And then boom, just keep going. And then digging a little deeper. And then all of a sudden, you want to offer each other rides and, go to the twins together. But we really need to do that because I feel like a lot of the conversations that we're talking about this ban, people have conceptualized it as a policy of a tribal thing. Like the Republicans are for it, so I must be for it. The Democrats are against it, then I must be, it's a policy that impacts a family. It's a policy that tells what America is to the rest of the world. It's a policy that we can see the negative side of it and maybe even see some positive side. But at the end of the day, to realize that this doesn't actually serve us. I think New York Times was reporting that in 2023, there was about 123 Somalis that came through the immigration process. In 123. 123 were stopped, and there was some sort of lap was made because we stopped. Who did you stop? You stopped families from connecting with other families. You stopped a mother from coming here, a grandmother coming here, a child coming connected with their family, somebody who's married who's here to come. That's what you did. And then, you use the safety as an excuse or whatever. So I feel like I will encourage us to get out of this moment by realizing that it impacts all of us.
Thank you, Jelani. We're reaching the end of our broadcast. Got less than a minute left. Matthew, how do you respond to that? Do you have any resonance with it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, stories unite us, and stories change hearts and minds. And I think that's exactly what Jelani was saying, right? We need to make the invisible visible. We need to get these stories out. Sahan Journal is part of that. Today's conversation is part of that. But the more that people know the people in their community, the people that they know, and they know as Twins fans, they know as soccer fans, that they're being impacted. They know their stories. To paraphrase Martin Luther King Jr., we're caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. That's true for this travel ban. It's true for every decision we as a society make. And I mean, it's hugely evident in all things immigration, because those are laws that affect people from day one, and they have huge ramifications. So I think the more that you can tell stories and humanize people, headlines don't humanize. They get out the basics, and they're bombastic, because that's kind of the job, is to kind of get out the headlines. I think what people need to know is what happens after, who's affected, what these people's lives are like, because that's, again, what changes hearts and minds. We've seen it through every civil rights movement, through every social justice movement, and every human rights movement. Once people see people rather than just issues, their hearts change, because people care for people. That's a basic human response. But if people don't know the immigrants among us, they don't know, I was coming home on the airport during Eid, and there was a huge line for trying to get a lift, for trying to get a taxi, and I didn't plan it, obviously, but I sat down and I was talking to my Lyft driver, and he's like, yeah, basically everybody with a family right now is with their family for the holiday. He's like, and I'm heading basically after this ride, I'm heading to be with my family too. Like, that it's such a small thing, but it's such a real thing. Like, those are the people that get us from point A to point B, and you don't know it till they're not there. It's the same thing with people. The people will never know who are impacted by these travel bans, as well as their loved ones here who are mourning, not getting to see a sister, not getting to get reunited with a parent, not getting to go to the funeral of their grandmother. Those are real stories, and those need to be told, because, again, those change hearts, minds, and they change policy.
We have to connect with people as we meet them where they are. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And thank you so much for everyone tuning in today.
And thank you for doing a great job.
Mm-hmm.
I just showed up. I just showed up for work. And we're at the end of our broadcast today. Thank you so much for joining us on our Instagram Live. Thank you to our fabulous guests, Jailani Hussain, Executive Director of CARE Minnesota, and Matthew Webster, Senior Immigration Attorney at Frederickson and Byron, VA. We'll have a recap article and the video of this entire conversation available for you all later today. The article may come out tomorrow. I have a busy schedule for the rest of my evening. But check out our YouTube page to watch previous Instagram Lives where we have covered TPS, Humanitarian Patrol, ICE and international students, and several more. And we'll have another IG Live next month. Thank you guys so much. Remember to stay up to date on the latest news about immigrants and other topics impacting immigrants and communities of color in Minnesota by visiting sahanjournal.com. All right. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, thank
Yeah, thank you.
That went by fast.
Yeah.
No, thank you. Picture?
That'd be great.
Socks on? I'm just kidding.
You
got socks on.
wait, there's socks in there?
Yeah.
I'm always jonesing for socks.
Oh. Next time I go to short for something?
Yeah, where the heck did that word come from? I don't know if I like it.
Swag?
Yeah, is it from something? Does it?
The one that I like is, what is it called? Tchotchke?
Tchotchke. The tchotchke. The flair.
Oh, I was
I'll
thinking
get some
the
B-roll.
Polish snacks.
Excuse me, I'm so
Kolaczkis?
sorry.
Tchotchkes, yeah.
Oh, those are delicious.
I'm sure swag is an immigrant word, too.
Some
I'm sure it's something
Polish.
we